governance and international relations. She is also the social media handler from the Asia Pacific of the Springer Metrics, Springer's official account for the Twitter and FB. She has been associated with the publishing industry for more than 15 years, including a year's stint in Dublin, Ireland for the international translation and publishing, a Dublin-based publishing enterprise involved in the software manual publication. She has worked with the Indian publishing houses like the Thomson Press and international publisher from John Willey and Sons before joining Springer. Nupoor ma'am was responsible for the publication of about 15 journals of John Willey and Sons in her earlier appointment. She was handling the publication of about 12 Springer journals till 2018 before moving on to the Springer's book program. She has overseen the publication process of about 400 Springer scholarly books since 2013. Ensuring the ethical compliance and wide use are few of her core responsibilities while publishing cutting-edge research on the topics handled by her. Today, she will be addressing us on the ethical publishing. Heartiest welcome to you, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you so much for that, warm welcome. Excuse me. And thank you for all who have joined for this session. It's an afternoon session and on a Friday and just after lunch, I guess. So I'll hope to make it, interesting enough. It is an important topic. It is a very, very important topic for those involved in academic research. And so I hope, we will both learn from each other today. And I look forward to questions from you at the end of the session. So without much ado, let me share my screen. Just let me know if you can see it properly in the manner that it is supposed to be seen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay. So it is not a tightrope, though a lot of people see publishing ethically as a kind of a balancing act that one must do. So let me move on to the next slide. And these are the topics that I will try to discuss today. What is publishing ethics? What are the international consensus around it? What is the most prevalent form of it? What is peer review manipulation? What is detection, investigation? And what are predatory journals? And how can we avoid the pitfalls? And what are the way forward? Publishing ethics is basically, it was defined as a set of common rules, which among all the stakeholders, authors, editors, reviewers, publishers, who get together to protect the integrity of the scientific record. Like these, are the keywords. These are common rules, and they are there to protect the integrity of the record. They are not to police anybody, right? So it forms. It is there based on consensus, on a common integrity, and on trust, where we are all together in this same boat. So we need to ensure that this boat floats, So, and how do we decide this consensus? So there's this Committee on Publication Ethics, which is COPE, which gives out these guidelines. These are just guidelines. It's not a police. All right, so there's a recording. Okay, so this is not a police, a publication police or anything. It just gives a guidelines, which is there on their site. As you can see, the guidelines are there on all these topics. And if you wish to know more, and you should know more about it, everybody who's there in the academic publishing sphere should know about it. So they should go there and read what is available. This is all the latest data. And there's this consensus, the consensus that I'm talking about. So consensus across a wide body of disciplines, across disciplines, about what is it that we need to follow in terms of to ensure research integrity, right? So and which leads us to, why does it happen? I mean, why is it that there's this unethical behavior? It's because of all these reasons. Like there's this pressure to publish. There's a career. One needs to advance in career. Like if you publish in high impact journals, then you advance in your career. If you publish in high impact journals, you get the fame. If you publish well, if your research is received well, then people will know you better. You'll go further. And this leads to sloppy and bad practices sometimes, or because of the hurry or because of the pressures, it may it may not be intentional. It could just lead to some sloppy practices because of which can result come out as an unethical behavior, although it might not be intentional, right? And of course, the extreme competition and a lot of times there's not enough training available to know what to define that that line between ethical and unethical in this race to publish. So this is how I think this would seem something familiar to the back-breaking work of trying to publish, or if not, then you will perish. But that's not how we should view it, right? So let's move on to publication ethics issues. What are there? So as you can see from this pie chart, the most prevalent form is plagiarism, and I think there's a lot of confusion about what exactly is plagiarism, how much is plagiarism. So I will try and address those issues, all those issues that are mentioned over here, in as many in the details in which they are required. Like obviously the maximum for plagiarism, then of course there's data, then authorship, ethics, or consent, and peer review process, and all other smaller forms of ethical issues which are there. So these are the fundamental ethical issues, so which is data fabrication or data falsification. Okay, so it may seem very obvious. I mean, obviously we should not fabricate or falsify data, but it does happen. Why does it happen? Because you have data is not going to be beautiful forever. Like it's not going to be how life. It's like life. It is messy. It's going to be messy, right? So people try and make it, try to make data conform to an idea that they want it to conform to, right? So when you try to do that, then it leads to practices which can lead to fabrication or falsification of data or data manipulation. So it's missing values or values that do not conform to your data is not such a bad thing, so because if it is something that is unexplained, like if you cannot explain it through your research, why is this data coming up like this, then you can leave it over there. You can look at it like a silver lining, because people will then be encouraged to take it up as further research topic, and then when they do that, your research is going to be cited. So that it's a good way. It's a good way to leave the data which is not really beautiful over there. The second thing is there, which is duplicate submission and publication and redundant publication. So one must be very careful about. I'm sorry, I don't know why it keeps on going back. Yeah, so the duplicate publication is, it includes when you have already published somewhere and some part of it you're trying to republish again, which sometimes is necessary. If for certain areas, it is necessary, some kind of reusage of one's own work, right? But that one needs to be very careful how much is being reused and to explain what is being reused. Verbatim copying of works, that I will explain later. I'll take this up, the plagiarism part in detail later in my slide. And authorship issues, this is really important because there are these 3 G's of authorship, excuse me. There's ghost, so the 3 different types of authorships, which are where you make somebody a guest authorship, where you, especially prevalent in certain cultures, where you feel obliged, or you feel, as a kind of somebody's, you look up to somebody and you would like them to be an author. So you make them a guest author, right? Or you gift your authorship to somebody. So these kind of authorships, unless somebody has really contributed, this is considered an unethical part, of publication. And then there's this ghost authorship, wherein somebody employs another person to write for them by giving them money and all. So again, a highly unethical practice. So and then, of course, there's undeclared conflict of interest and consent to privacy, which again I'll take later on in my slides. So yeah, as I said, data can you can make data say what you want, and sometimes data will speak in a strange language, as you can see from this slide. So it's not always intentional, what I said, and that is the challenge here. So the results being falsified or wrong, that's not always the case. That these things will not get published mostly in most of the times. What we are talking about is unverified. When it is not intentional, it is basically when you're talking about data which is unverified, or research trying to publish something that is unverified, overstating something, misrepresenting, or sloppy research, right? So it's as I said, it's not always intentional, but sometimes it is intentional, and it is caught, because there are these really highly successful people who were, after a stint, very, very successful stint as rising stars in their own areas, they were caught, and all their papers were had to be retracted or corrected. It's a short road to fame, and really it is short, because with current tools, one gets caught, and then it's not a good thing after that. I mean, it's not worth it. So what are the issues that are related to human research that one needs to look out for? So in ethical approval, one needs to, it's always good to have an ethics committee in one's institution, and to run it through them, because it's easier. They will be able to guide one. So every institution must invest in an ethical committee who is up to date in all these issues. So if we are doing surveys, or if we are going out, then all these, they need ethical approval. I mean, it has to be, how are you planning to make it independent? Sometimes some journal editors may ask you questions about documentation regarding ethical approvals needed of these conducted surveys. Then in these documents, you also need to show consents, like if the age group is of minors, then parental consent, or especially you have to consider the vulnerable populations, who may not be aware of it, and are you making them fully aware of what they are going to consent to, and then taking their consent. That is also important. And in some cases, ethical committees can waive these consents, because then some of the research should be like mostly for psychological studies, where you should not tell the participant that they are they are a part of a research. But later on, so for that, one needs to have proper discussion with the ethical committees to ensure that one is on the right side. For case reports from companies, if you need to take consent to publish, one is consent to participate, and then there's consent to publish. Some of them may consent to participate, some of them may not consent to publish. So both of them are necessary and must be compiled together if that is the kind of research that you are doing. And consent to participate may be waived away by ethical committee of a journal, but consent to publish will not. So that is necessary, and one needs to ensure that this is done. So which brings me to plagiarism. So plagiarism is as you saw, it's a it's the most prevalent form of ethical misconduct, which we are all trying to ensure that does not happen, because a lot of time it happens because people are not aware. So it's plagiarism is when somebody tries to pass off somebody else's work as their own, right? Even the literature review, if it is copied from somewhere, it is plagiarism. I mean, one cannot say that somebody has already written, it is cited, but if it is being used, the literature review is being used for another work from another work, that's not how it has to be. It has to be there, done. You have to discuss a work in your own words, not in the words of an author who has previously published on that topic. So large amount of texts which are copied without clear attribution to the correct source, okay, that is plagiarism. And this includes self-plagiarism, where the authors sometimes very correctly feel that this is my own work. If I'm reusing it, it should not be a problem, because I'm writing about the same thing. So why should I write about? See, reusing one's own literature review is fine. I mean, reusing the same words to describe the literature is also fine, but to reuse in the sense that to pass off one work that has already been published and then make little changes here and there, and then come out passing it on as a second article, that is inappropriate. So and whenever there's any reproduction, then it has to be very, very clearly mentioned and attributed, and the reason for it mentioned. So how do we avoid these plagiarism pitfalls? So whenever one refers to publishing work, even in abstracts, please, I will say that everyone must use their own explanations for it. Sometimes it stays on the back of your mind. You read something interesting and it stays with you, and so when you are writing about about that topic, you automatically tend to write in the same language, because it was so impressive when you read it first. So it may creep in. So one has to always keep a lookout for these kind of things. I mean, how much of somebody else's work are you reusing? So any literature, as I mentioned, even using somebody else's literature review is also plagiarism, and that is something that you cannot even cite, because it's a literature review. So be careful, because that also gets highlighted when a check is done. Any reuse, always mention in your when you are submitting your paper, that where one can expect to find reuse and why it is there and where it has come from. Why is it necessary? Okay, exact usage, if it is necessary, it must be within quotes. If it is an exact reuse of something which has already been published, quotes has to be within a certain limitations. So find out with your publisher how much can you use within, how many quotes can you use in a particular article. Always citations, of course, and proper referencing must be there. And limits, if it crosses certain permissible limits, one needs to obtain permission from copyright owner, right? So in this, one needs to be careful, because sometimes one feels that if it is freely available on the net, it is fine. But even that is copyright protected. So one needs to check for rights and permissions for everything that is there available, even if it is available on the net, how much of it can be reused in a commercial publication, because all journal publications, especially if you're doing it with a commercial publisher, is commercial. So if it can be reused for a commercial publication, one needs to check that. Sources of figures, charts, tables, graphs must be mentioned. It's a very good practice if you mention that the original figure and source. If you are using content from another paper, and then forming a table out of it, even then that is a source. If you're taking the table from another paper, be careful, because that paper may have used some other source as to prepare that table, right? So when you are using the same table, mention both sources, because the original is from some other work. So be careful about reuse in that term. And always, every institution, uh, one must, all the researchers must press their institutes to invest in a tracking software, because it is essential, it is a must, because every journal nowadays, every important journal is having a software to test, and you will be lagging behind if you do not test your paper before submitting it, right? So institutions must invest in these papers. So as I mentioned, even in open access works, be very careful, because there are different types of open accesses, and they allow different types of usage from them. So read what kind of open access you are taking in and how much can it be used. Which brings me to the peer review manipulation, right? So this is what one thinks about peer review. Always there is this trepidation before, oh, I've got this great piece of work now. Let me put it through this, Agni Pariksha of the peer review. So what happens? What is peer review manipulation? So any attempt to prevent or inappropriately influence the independent assessment of a piece of scientific work by a peer is a peer review manipulation. And you will be surprised how often that happens. And it takes time to catch them, but we are looking at it, and they do get caught. So people are increasingly using sophisticated ways, and when one is asked to suggest reviewers, a lot of people suggest their false names or false IDs, and there are peer review cartels that are employed for this. And we are all looking at this on how to tackle it, and it's a very, very serious issue with us. So these are some of the peer review manipulations that were caught recently by all different journals, where people tried to use this process to manipulate their papers. As an author, how can you avoid that your paper gets caught in these kind of issues? One should never hand over control of one's manuscript to anyone who is not a co-author. So do not give it to somebody else to upload on a site, right? If you wish to use an agency to improve the manuscript, you must inform the journal editor who are working on your behalf and what are they doing on your behalf, so that they are aware. Anything else other than that, if an agency is trying to use some reviewers, then you must be aware of it. And you must inform the journal editor. Author, as authors, you are the ones who are finally responsible, not the agency. So you have to be updated always about your paper. Okay, and final submission, of course, should be by the authors themselves, so that they are aware of what are the details that they are sharing. And so peer review is actually a very, very positive process. It's not how it is depicted over here. These guys, you should look at them as people who are taking out time to look at your paper and to ensure that it is relevant and it gets published, and it gets published in an improved form. So it advances what is also already known. So it is a positive process. So how do we detect these kind of misconduct? So it is harder to get away with. But as I said, we are all using these latest software for plagiarism screening, and authors have this ethical responsibility to comply with the standards which are there. Always disclose if there's any conflict of interest that you can see when you are submitting your paper. If there's research involving human participants, one must be very careful. That should be, as I mentioned before, all the consents and everything. Be careful that you're giving that. and that the consents that you have taken are informed consents. That also should be mentioned. The publishers, we have this, as I mentioned, the COPE guidelines, and that all the researchers should also be updated with those and ensure that you are in compliance with those, right? And be careful about, take time to also go through the journals publishing ethics policies, because they sometimes have their own policy and how things should be submitted and how things should be highlighted. So when you're submitting it to a journal, just go and look at their publishing policy and read this very carefully, because this is screened earlier before it goes into the review process. So if it gets rejected there, it won't even go into the review process, right? So be careful about what you are disclosing in the beginning. So what can one do, right? To in the end, when you are submitting, just go before you submit, ask yourself this question: that if what I'm doing and what I've done, or the practice that I've done, if it were to become public knowledge, would I have any reason to feel ashamed or uncomfortable? If the answer is yes, or even maybe, that means you should not do it. Okay, if the answer is no, but if you're it's a no, like that. So then ask somebody. It's always good to ask someone who's more experienced if you have any doubt about it, right? Sometimes even ask the journal, because they have their people who respond on these matters. So what happens if something gets caught? These are the ways in which the literature is corrected. So it's all about correcting the literature, correcting the knowledge base. It's not about policing, or it's not about canceling culture. It's about correcting the literature. So it's done through retractions, corrections, expressions of concerns. All these are methods in which we deal with ethical and legal issues, right? When an article is retracted, it's not totally removed from the archives. It says retracted and the reason is given, right? So which shows, and then because of the reason, then people know why was it retracted. So why was this literature corrected? So all these reasons are given while those things being there on the site. So there are occasions in which it is removed completely, which are legal reasons, which I've listed over here. There may be copyright infringement. In that case, one has to remove it completely, or breach of confidentiality, like patents and confidential data, etc. If there's fraud, these kind of things, then one needs to remove it completely. But that is quite rare. And what can authors do to prevent this? Okay, so publishing ethics should be considered at the earliest possible stage of your research, not towards the end of it, right? Because then when you are trying to put things together, put the ideas together, concept together, then you need to see at which stage you need to take what kind of ethical approvals, consents are needed. So right at the beginning, start thinking about it. Agree on how much of authorship and division of work, because that is also an important area of ethical consideration. Signing off an internal memoranda sometimes would be needed. Check on the guidelines of journals and the publishers that you are aiming for. Who is the corresponding author is also important. Check on the scope, threshold, all these journal requirements that are listed over there. I will be sharing the this slide deck with you, so you can see these kind of journal requirements are necessary to check before you undertake the research. And what else can help? The ORCID ID is there, which kind of keeps track of the researchers. So it ensures that this is a unique ID. This is your unique ID. So it ensures that your research is uniquely available and nobody else can use it. So keep your create your ORCID ID and then use it later on. So predatory journals, sometimes it's not only you will say that, okay, is the onus always on the researcher? No, it's also on the publishers. So as you know, everybody is now trying to publish open access if one has access to funds, because there are so many benefits of it, in terms of accessibility, downloads, and the reach of your research. So what happens if you're looking at the benefits only? One needs to really see which are the whether you're not falling for a bad journal or a journal which is not where you should publish your research. So these are some of the steps. First, go and see whether who is the publisher. If it is a reputed publisher, you can go ahead. If it is not, if you have not heard, then see the second one. Second rung is editorial board. If those are known, internationally renowned, familiar names, okay, fine, great. Go ahead and submit. If not, go to the next one. You see where it is indexed. If it is indexed by these well-known common databases, then great, go ahead, submit. If not, go to the next one. And see who have published in this before. Do you recognize the names? And of course, the red flag is if they're asking, when are they asking you to pay? In all the reputed journals, open access fee only comes into consideration after the review process. Only after a paper has been accepted will you be asked to pay or to indicate whether you want to publish it as open access or not. If somebody is asking you to pay in the very beginning of this process, that's a red flag. Be careful. This is the site where one can go, think, check, submit. .org. Go there, and it has these list. It's a questionnaire, and if the answer to all these questions is yes, okay, you can go ahead and submit. If it is no, then you need to be careful about that journal. And of course, this ethical open access publishing model is the gold open access, which is a verified publisher type of open access. Okay, so it is available on the publisher site. The other one is the green open access, which is a self-archiving one. Okay, so one needs to be very careful about that because it's the authors are archiving it on a particular site, their work which is either published or going to be published. So one needs to be careful, and one must check with the publisher what is the correct way of publishing green open access. So how do we avoid the pitfalls and how do we move forward? So there are so many of these industry standards and material available. One must always keep on reading this. There are these seminars that are happening on specific details, right, of research integrity. There's every 10 years, there's this statement that comes out where people get together. Consensus is built on these activities. Like the latest one was Hong Kong statement, happened in 2020. And we too have these free tutorials. And one can go on the site of the publishers and then look at these tutorials to keep up to date. There's this journal code of conduct for both book editors, journal editors, for authors, what should one do? So these are some of the things that can help you keep up to date, and that is how you can avoid the pitfalls of publication and end up having a great publication. So thank you very much for your interest and your patience. And if there are any questions now, I would be happy to take it.
Thank you, Nupoor Singh. Sanjay here.
Hello. Hello, Sanjay. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, and I'm sitting beside me is the co-chair, Professor Sanjeev Kapoor, who was an author in the Springer book also. It's book. So we all welcome you, and immensely useful session, this one, I think, for anyone who's interested in publishing and publishing in a high-rated journal. And I would now keep the floor open for any questions, discussions. Please have a conversation with Nupoor. You won't find her. She's not so easy to find, I know. So she has given her time. So please, any questions regarding publications may address, please, our research scholars, our participants. Anyone? Yes.
Probably it was comprehensive enough for people to understand.
Whether you want to speak to her?
Indeed, it is a great opportunity for us to listen to you. And we are grateful that Springer stepped out and has become our publication partner for select papers that would be published. And because one problem that we face as researchers is that knowledge gets confined. And it's not every day that somebody is going to bankroll your publication to appear as open access. Now, for keen researchers who do not have the backing of institutions, there is a major problem. So one issue that young people who are not yet institutionally affiliated finds is that their publications do not get access, open access, which by definition limits its visibility and limits its use. So is it possible for large publishers like Springer Nature to think in terms of creating a different section where young researchers who are not yet affiliated but their work is very, very important could be given open access, maybe 10% or 20% of publications are given open access by the publishers for young people who are not yet affiliated, but give them the option of open access or give them the opportunity of open access. That is something that is what is emerging out of my conversations with people who are part of this conference.
Indeed, I completely agree with you, and I feel that there has to be, and everybody, all the stakeholders must get together on this issue to ensure that, this matter of funding open access does not remain, does not ensure that only research from a particular a sphere or geographical region who are able to provide the funding should be highlighted, and it should be a more inclusive practice, and we are all working on it. As publishers, we have our own constraints on how to do it, because at the end of the day, we are commercial publishers, so we need to show a positive balance sheet. So how do we do that while also ensuring that the researchers, the young researchers from areas where the funding is not available are also getting get published? So there are journals wherein one can apply, and one need, which are open access journals, and where one need not wherein they choose and publish the papers. Springer also publishes some of these journals, but of course, as you would understand, that there's a high level of competition to publish in such journals, because everybody would want to publish open access. So there is, this conversation is ongoing, and it's a conversation which is not only between the publisher and researchers. We are talking to the policy makers as well, but this is a matter where everybody, there needs to be a push from the academic community. There should be a want from the academic community towards their policy makers as well, so that they also come to the table and talk to publishers in that matter, from the point of view of the researchers, of their region, that how can we make researchers from this region reach out to the wider world in a more inclusive manner. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, and this is happening, but there's no and there's light at the end of the tunnel, I feel. But at this point of time, I think we need to wait and watch, because there are a lot of conversation happening on this.
Yeah.
Ma'am, there's a question from previous colleague.
Hello, ma'am. You mentioned that, especially in psychological studies, it is often difficult to ascertain the boundaries of consent and how to position your research as a non-intrusive one while at the same time extracting all the necessary information is a quandary that qualitative researchers and people who rely on interviews often face. So, what are your suggestions for addressing this notion that whenever you are interviewing someone, you are obstructing their own access to their privacy. You're barging in on their own personal experiences.
Yeah, exactly. So that is why informed consent is what even the journals as well as the publishers and the ethical committees they want. So long as one makes, so there are two parts of your question. For the psychological aspect, I would say that in a lot of these psychological research, one needs to the participants should not be made aware that they are participants in a research. So one needs to get their unbiased and uninformed how do I say response towards a certain criteria or stimulus that is presented in front of them, right? So once when that kind of research is involved, the ethical committee of a journal will and when a researcher is approaching or submitting their paper, they need to then mention in their ethical report that the participants were not informed that they were, but later on the same participants then need to be told once the research is over that they were part of this research. One needs to go to each of them and tell them that you were part of this research, and would you like the data that we have collected from you to be part of this research study. If they say yes, only then can a researcher use that data from that participant. If a participant says no, then the researcher cannot use that data, right? But you can, as a researcher, you can say that this percentage of participants refused their consent to publish, right? But this is a trend that is coming out of it. We cannot provide you data for this, exact data for this, because they refuse consent. But this is the trend that is coming. Now it is up to them to whether they want that part also to be, they will tell, okay, this you can remove this part. It doesn't, they need not be a part of the paper. Okay, so that is so far as the psychological research is concerned. The other part of your question, which was about qualitative research, and once you're doing that, how much should you inform, or how do you inform, or how do you tell them that that the questions that they are being asked, sometimes of very personal nature, would be used. How ethical is that? I mean, research is about digging deep. Sometimes one needs to dig deep into what is considered as a very, very personal sphere, right? So that is why in those cases, it is ethics come into the picture like so strongly, because the researcher will have access to these very personal data, and now it is up to the researcher to make the data available in a way, like to the journal, one needs to give the entire data, like in the way that you have got it, right? With the consent, and it should be informed consent. People should be made aware that this data would be used for the research, and this data will be shared with the journal, right? So they should know that their names would be there. Some of them may say that we do not want our names to be put there. So when you can remove the names and then share it with the journal with this note that you have the names with you, and you can give it to the journal if required. But because it has been told that they were not very comfortable sharing, and they have given their consent to publish only on this criteria, that their names are not included in the data that is shared, right? So these are the things. one needs to be very, very open about the kind of sharing that one is doing and how much is one sharing with the journal and why you are withholding certain information. And that is what the ethical committee will see.
Last question, Madam. Professor Vishaka Vansal.
Hi. So I'll look at that side, I think then I'll be visible. Camera is that side. So hi, Mr. Nupoor. Actually nice to attend your lecture. It was quite informative. There is just one question, or in fact the problem that there are predatory journals. Now some are mentioned identified, but in some cases you won't say predatory, but the journal may be in a category or a good category, but the papers show the quality when we ourselves read, we don't find it up to the mark. What can be a message from your side for the researchers, and what at your level, how to try to, there is always a time gap, no, when the final action will be taken, but we may have already published in that. Yeah, what is the suggestion from your side, what researchers can do in that?
So, the pressure to publish as much as it is on the researcher, the pressure to publish is the same on the publisher, right? And to publish good research. So we are all working in this pressure cooker atmosphere, and we need to ensure that we are kind of helping each other to release that pressure in the correct way that it should be done, right? So in the beginning, when a journal is being established, there are a lot of things that will not happen. Maybe some good people might not give their names to be associated with it. It will not be indexed in the databases. It will not be taken up by these international publishers, big names, right? One needs to start young and then take baby steps. It takes a lot of time to establish a journal and take it to a certain level, right? So if you are, and then one tends to get caught in this vicious circle in the beginning, where if it is not such a big journal, of course the big names or the good articles, they do not come to it, right? So if one is going there and seeing that what kind of papers is being published over there, one sees that, okay, it's I mean, there are some good ones, but then some of them are not so great, and then one thinks about whether one wants to publish in this journal or not. Okay, so the journal, it may not be a bad journal. I mean, it may not be a journal which is indulging in unethical practices, right? Or a predatory journal. It could just be that it is just trying to move up in the circle. So one needs to check the background, see the editorial board. The editorial board is one of the most important things about a journal. If the editorial board consists of names who are established names in that particular, even if those names are maybe not of world, not renowned across the globe, but if they are established, even regional, if there are names which are established regionally, they will not put a journal together. It's a very high risk proposition. So if they have put together something, they are trying to move it up, then it is up to you as a researcher. You want to contribute to the upliftment of a journal, but of course that's a very precious article that you have over there. You feel this would do very well. Sometimes one needs to publish in a high impact factor journal or something. So that, as a reviewer, as a researcher, as an academic, you're forever this kind of these things are always there, and one needs to consider all the factors when you're taking. Need not be a predatory journal, as you said, but then finally it is up to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nupoor. We are coming to the end of the session, and it's a very enriching and enlightening session, and practical also, so practical for all of us. I would now request the anchor to have the last word, and then we have a small, present duty to perform. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insights into the most important topic for all the researchers and academicians. Your words were very informative and they contain a lot of learning for all of us. So now I would request Professor Sanjay Mukherjee sir to felicitate ma'am.
Well, it has been a long relationship with Madam Nupoor Singh for the last few years. Earlier, it was initially as an author and an editor for me, and now it's gone institutional, right? So we are really happy and delighted to have you with us, madam. And that Supreme Nature has considered the selected publications, selected papers from this sustainability conference for publication in a Scopus volume in future. We'll inform the participants about it later. But now, thank you very much, Nupoor, for your time and for all your precious wisdom. Here is something for you. Hope you
Thank
like
you.
it.
Thank you so much. And I would like to really thank you, for giving me this opportunity. And I'm very sorry that I could not, come there and physically be a part of the conference. But I wish every one of you, all the success for this conference and for everything else that you, think of doing. And I hope that I can come for the other conferences in future. And all the best to everybody. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for this.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we will be proceeding for the technical session 2.2, which will be concerned with the sustainable development and the socio-economic balance. For this session, I would like to invite our session chair, Professor Subhadeep Mukherjee, sir, Assistant Professor from Economics and Public Policy at IIM Shillong, and the session coordinator, PhD third year research scholar, Pawan Kamble, to take up the second session.